So in the Mittler Rebbe, it's a varich. First to say a mimer on this Dibra Maschil. However, Rebbe Rashab elaborated in some areas that it wasn't elaborated on by the other Rebbeim, and there are some inyanim from the other Rebbeim that you don't find in the Rebbe Rashab's mimer. But the idea is that it talks about descent, it talks about divisiveness, it talks about because that's, as we're going to learn, that's what Midyan is all about. There's a story that there's a little bit of background on this mimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe, not too much, but the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about Shabbos Pashas Noach, when there was no Farbrengen, no mimer that Shabbos. So the younger light, the Chassidim, and the Frierdiker Rebbe also. It was about a year after his marriage, Tafresh Nun Tes, and Pashas Shabbos Pashas Noach. And Frierdiker Rebbe got married at the end of Tafresh Nun Zayin. So he suddenly is honored by a surprise appearance of his father. And his father said, I came to make Kiddush, because the Frierdiker Rebbe was already sitting by his Suda and it was Farbrengen. And the Rebbe Rashab came in, and that's when the Rebbe Rashab said the mimer again, repeated the mimer that he said on Simchas Torah. What happened with this Midyan character? Midyan is unique in the sense that Midyan went and mixed into the battles that the Yidden were dealing with Moav. Moav was afraid because the Yidden just conquered Sichon and Og, Sichon Melech HaBoshem, Og Melech HaMori, Sichon Melech HaMori, Og Melech HaBoshem. They were just marching through and they were taking over and they were destroying any army that stood in front, stood before them. And so Moav was concerned. Now there's different mefarshim that Moav wasn't really afraid because he knew that the Eibusha said not to touch Moav. But the prevailing opinion is that he was concerned. He was very concerned, and he hired Bilam to curse the Yidden. But what he was doing was, in a sense, survival. It was, in a sense, self-defense. Bilam gave him an idea to get the Yidden to sin with znus, to have immoral relations with non-Jewish women, and that it led that they should serve, worship the Zara, and all that, which led to a big death toll of 24,000 Yidden. And it was very sad. It was a difficult moment for the Yidden. So the thing about Midyan is, Midyan came in out of nowhere. Midyan wasn't at all in that area to worry about the Yidden taking him over. Midyan was an enemy, actually, with Moav. So here you have Midyan, the enemy of Moav, which normally you would think that Moav would be very happy to support the Yidden, to join the Yidden's cause. Again, Midyan would be very happy to join the cause of the Yidden against Moav, because they were arch enemies, and they fought difficult battles. And here Moav says, 1 second, these are Yidden, and the hatred for Yidden was what superseded the animosity that they had towards Moav. And Moav had nothing, Midyan had nothing to gain by this. They were just spoilers. They just came in here to make problems for the Yidden with no real reason, just for the sake of adding their support to destroy the Yidden. So that's why Moav stands out. And Moav is the Midian stands out, excuse me, for constantly exchanging these two. I'll get it right one day. And that's why Midian, this is an act and this is an expression of sinas pinam, baseless hatred. Baseless hatred, which we'll explain in the Maimer, is something that it's higher or lower actually, but it's not based on reason. When it's not based on reason, it's evil through and through. It's evil to the core. Now, just as an introduction, continuing this little introduction before we get into the Maimer, what the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain in this Maimer and trace back the roots of hatred, the roots of divisiveness, of dispute, and show that it could be coming from the core, extreme hatred, and that is the klipa of Midian, which is totally only because of pure hatred. And the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain that it's linked to Yeshes, to Gaiva, which again is klipa. It's all the same idea, the self-centeredness, self-absorption, etc. So let's get into the Maimer now. And yes, you can see that there are different lines that I highlighted. The orange is mostly questions. It's yellowish. It's a little bit different the color than actual color which I used, but it still is a lighter tone than the orange, a more yellow tone. So that is supporting whatever's being said. If there's a question, it's supporting the question. If there's something else that it's making, a point that it's making, it's supporting that point. And then you'll see there's another color, blue, which is more like factual statements and so on. And there's some lines that I highlighted with a pen, I underscored with a pen, which will come to that. So I tried to just keep things more organized instead of just highlighting everything without knowing what it's about. So there's a pasuk, and the pasuk states, "Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Lamer." It's a pasuk in Parshas Matos. Moshe the following. Just trying to set up shop over here. I apologize. So the Eibusha says in Parshas Matos Lamed Aleph. That's Kapitel Lamed Aleph, pasuk Aleph through Dalet. This is what we're going to be reading now. Nekoim nikmas bnei Yisroel me'eis hamidyonim. Avenge, take revenge for the Yidden from the Midyanim on behalf of the Yidden. Retribution. And afterwards, you'll be gathered into your people. Which means that now, after this task is fulfilled of taking revenge of the Midyanim for the honor of the Yidden, then Moshe Rabbeinu could go up to the mountain and his neshama could ascend on high and he could leave this world. Okay, and then we see how Moshe Rabbeinu fulfills Hashem's command, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the Yidden. He says, "Vaydaber Moshe chulu," and he says, "Heichultzu me'yitchem chulu, mobilize v'yu al Midian loseis nikpas havai b'Midian elef lamata chulu l'chol matis Yisroel." And there should be 1,000 men from each tribe that will go into battle with Midian. So now let's focus on the highlighted, so we'll just discuss the questions on the plus. So the Rebbe says, you need to understand, there seems to be apparently a link here between Moshe Rabbeinu, the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the war with Midian. Because the pasuk states clearly, "Achar teyasef el hamecha." And when you look at this question, you see that the pasuk is telling me two things concerning Moshe Rabbeinu and the Milchama of Midian. Number one, it has to be through Moshe Dafka, right? Let's just go to the next highlighted line. And number two, which is va'oid mashma shaydei b'chamazu nishlam shleimus shayrish nishmasai. And through this Mochama, it's going to be his complete fulfillment and completeness of his neshama, of his root of his neshama. Why must we say this? So first, let's go to the first one. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was told that he can't go into Eretz Yisrael. So he could have passed away in the middle before this war. Why did the war have to wait till Moshe Rabbeinu does battle with Midian? What was so important for Moshe Rabbeinu to be around for that battle? So that forces us to say, that leads us to say that Moshe Rabbeinu's mission was to be the one that leads that war, the one that coordinates the war, and the one that runs the war, and it's done through Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one dispatching the soldiers, etc. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who gives over the message, and Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who's arranging this whole war. And we see that clearly from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is there only to be there before he passes away, so he could be the one in charge of this war. That's number one. Number two, when it says which means then you could pass away, it's also indicating that that's going to be the completion of his avodah. That's going to be when he completely fulfills his mission in this world, and now his neshama reaches perfection through its mission in this world. And the last thing, as we know, as it says, v'yadua the histalkus is the tachlis aliyah, and that is what completes everything. That means whatever happens in the time of histalkus is what is tachlis. That means when a person passes away, now everything of his whole life's efforts goes in and becomes higher and elevated, and it comes together and it completes his mission. So obviously, in order for him to finish up Moshe Rabbeinu's tremendous avodah in this world, but it was still lacking something to complete his avodah, which means that is what perfects everything, was the Milchama with Midian that he waged and he was in charge of, and it dafka had to be through him. So obviously, you go down to the orange line again, we come back to the question, the general question, the whole zeh, bottom right before the end of the paragraph, tzarich lahavin, lama hayatzricha liyas ha'milchama yedei Moshe dafka, u'mahu shenishla nishmasa yedei zeh. Hey, as we pointed out, the first point that we see from the pasuk is that it had to be dafka through him. Why did it have to be dafka through him? And second of all, what is it so special about this war that Moshe Rabbeinu was given the mission to be the one in charge of, that is what completes his whole avodah, what perfects, what gives it the finishing touches. So he could now be nostalgic and go up to the level of beyond the limitations of a neshama and a guf. The last thing, the one that brings to that perfection, is this war. What is it so special about this war that is what shenishlam nishmasai ayidezeh, that his neshama was completed by this. Generally, just to add a little bit, I understand that, like I said before, that the time of histalkus, we see that from Rabbi, and we see that it's brought to Kabbalah and Chassidus, and the Alter Rebbe brings it in Tanya. The time of a person's histalkus, that is when everything shines brightly and brilliantly. But let's look back at what's going on before that and why it's that way. And just very briefly, the neshama comes down into this world to be able to achieve heights that it cannot achieve without coming down into this world, because this is where we do mitzvahs, this is where we learn Torah, this is where we serve Hashem, and this is where we refine the Nefesh HaBahamis and do battle with the Yetzer Hara. We're invited the nitzutzes of this world. This is where the game is played plays itself out. So this is where, in general, the whole point of being in this world is to perfect the neshama and bring it to a higher level than it is originally. Now, when we come to the last final point, it's no different than any other completion of any other mission, any other task, any other project. That's when it's completely perfected and finished. So here we have, what is that one thing that's missing that leads to the ultimate perfection of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama? That's the Milchama with Midian. We need to understand the connection. Okay, so now we can go to the next piece. And the next piece is going to tell us about Midian. As you can see, it says, I wrote over here, Midian Menaged Hashem Havaya. But before that, let's just talk about the Kitzur. Milchamas Midian Shayachas L'Moshe L'Istalkosei. That's just a summary. If you want to have one sentence that will tell you what this first chapter is about, what this first place is about, it's about the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and Midian, and the Milchama of Midian. Okay. Now let's talk about Midian, because the only way we're going to understand the connection between the Milchama of Midian with Moshe Rabbeinu is by understanding what Midian is all about. If you have to have a war, you have to wage a war with an enemy, and the enemy, and it's considered such an important war, and it's considered such a great victory, and you have to know what was so bad about this enemy. Why was it such a great thing to defeat this enemy more than other enemies? So, continues the Rebbe Rashab, we also have to stand the whole purpose of this Milchama to wage war against Midian, to take Nekama, to revenge for the Yidden, what the Midianim did to the Yidden. They caused the Yidden such terrible catastrophe, such terrible strife. But it seems that this is a very spiritual war. That's where we're going now with this. We're taking this war and we're showing that it's different than other wars. Normally, even though the enemies are against Yidden and the enemies hate Yidden, we have plenty of those enemies as well. But when there's a war, we conquer their land. That's what it evolves around. It evolves around the conquering of a country, of a land. Here, it seems like there was no conquering of any land. So what was the war about? And that's why we say, and the Rebbe proves how we see that it wasn't about conquering the land, and just for the sake of revenge. Just for the sake of revenge. Which means that even when there is revenge in the picture, there's still certain missions, there's certain goals, and what spells out the victory, what defines the victory is when you take the land away from the enemy that you're destroying, because they hate you, because they're bad to you. But you still, it's based on taking away land, and here there's no land being taken away. That's what's mashma from Pashtus Apsukim, says the Rebbe, even though there's some other opinions. Not to get into it right now. So says the Rebbe, B'tzarech lahavi bazeh, in the orange lines on the top. V'mayim havaya l'Moshe ksiv nekayim nikmas b'nei Yisroel. U'Moshe amal Yisroel, the last day says nikmas havaya b'Midian. So if you look at the Psukim, look in the beginning of the Maimer, it says, the Eibusha says to Moshe, and it makes sense, right? Why does it make sense? Because the Yidden were the ones that were harmed by Midian. And the Eibusha is now doing whatever he could do to Midian, whatever he's doing to Midian, he could do whatever he wants, but whatever it is that the Eibusha decided to do for the sake of the honor of the Yidden, for the sake of retribution for what was done to the Yidden. But an interesting thing happens that when Moshe comes and talks to the Yidden, what does he tell them? You should go wage war and you should set upon Midian, and you should bring about the revenge of the Eibishter in Midian. So this is a little bit of a discrepancy over here. As it points out, and you look further in these the highlighted red lines on the top, Ma'onikvas Havaya, Halelei Osum Midian Ra Rakli Yisroel, as it says in the pasuk, that they are antagonizers against you. They antagonize, they're instigators. They start trouble with you. They started up with the Yidden directly. Of course, as the Rebbe is going to point out, but you know how much attached we are to the Yidden, to the Eibishter. We are the Eibishter's chosen people. So really, if someone starts with us, starts with the Eibishter. But nevertheless, the Eibishter already says to Moshe, Nekaim Nikmas Yisroel. So we're not asking how is our revenge on our behalf also the revenge on the Eibishter's behalf. We're not asking that question in a vacuum. We're basically asking, why does Moshe go out of his way to change from what the Eibishter is saying? And it even is much more directly connected to the Yidden, because Midian started up with the Yidden. They didn't go against Hashem directly. They went to terrorize the Yidden. So that's why we have the question. Now let's go again to the so if we go to the yellow, he's gonna point out, why does he say Nikmas Havaya b'minyan? That tells us that there is a special connection to the word Havaya. So besides being an akama of Hashem, the word Nikmas Havaya, Yudke Vovke, is something that comes into focus. That means there is a connection between the name of Havaya and Midian's behavior. And this is why Moshe then says in the pasuk, Limkaim, it means they have to correct that blemish that they brought against the Shem Havaya. As we're going to soon explain, what is this Shem Havaya that Midian damaged? And now the way to fix it is through the Nekama. What we get from this is that we understand that Moshe is not saying something different than the Eibishter. He's not just talking about the idea of Hashem. He's talking about what damage did Midian cause by going against the Yidden. They damaged Shem Havaya. What is that supposed to mean? We'll get to it in a moment. Going to the orange now. Okay, so we established, we took away the question. The question was why one place it says when the Abish is talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, it says Yisroel, and why when Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to the Yidden, it says Havaya. And so we're saying it's not just about the Abish there and the Yidden. It's about what was caused by the behavior, by the actions of the Midianites against the Yidden. They damaged Shem Havaya. So now it leads us to ask, which is what we ask over here, what is it about Midian that they caused this kind of damage to Shem Havaya? And so much so that the pasuk has to go, and the Eibush has to go now and make sure that it's corrected by taking revenge against them. What's wrong? The enemies of the Yidden. So they damage Havaya. I mean, like basically, why not type of thing? Is there a case that there could be Klippa that damages Shem Havaya? So why can't it be Midian? So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe Rashab, this is every time I say the Rebbe, I mean the Rebbe Rashab. You want to talk about evil? You want to talk about those things that damage the name of Havaya, which we'll talk about what it means. It's what we're leading to. Zion Umais, they're much more detrimental to Havaya. Because the Zion Umas, they're all about the Zion Midas Hadois, the evil traits. What are the evil traits? They are the opposite of Kedusha, of the Midas of Kedusha. Midian is not part of the Zion Umas, which means Midian is not even in that realm. Midian doesn't even have that power of destruction that the Zion Umas have, because we know the Zion Umas to stand for the Zion Midas Hadois that come from Klippa. Okay, now we have one more question that kind of seems to be not fitting with how it says in the pasuk. Another question on the wording in the pasuk. It says Heichultzu meitchem, hoye tzorech liis Yeichultzu meitchem. Yeichultzu, because Heichultzu means all of you. Meitchem means of you, and we saw that only 1,000 from each tribe was taken. So Yeichultzu means there should be of you, there should be those that mobilize. Heichultzu would mean you as all of you. So we have a problem. Why does it say Heichultzu and then Meitchem? Of you, from you, a part of you, which we see was 1,000 from each tribe, not all the Yid, not all the people from every tribe. And also, the Gam Hashekotsu Achakach, Lamata says later, L'chol Mates Yisroel. When it was talking about how they mobilized details, it says L'chol Mates Yisroel. It should have said Mikol Mates Yisroel. L'chol Mates Yisroel again would indicate that it was every tribe, the complete tribe. It should have said of all the tribes, not to all the tribes. It means they are the ones of the tribes. They are of the tribes. They aren't the tribes. They aren't all the tribes. They are of all the tribes. Okay. So now we're going to get into a little bit more into the Maimer proper. This is just setting things up by focusing on the pasuk, seeing some discrepancies, which leads us to begin to understand that there's something spiritual going on over here. Obviously, if you're not conquering their land, if Moshe Rabbeinu has to be the one, and it's so much so that he has to be the one that even though it was decreed and he was told and it was decided and he couldn't beg anymore, as we know from Kahanov, he begged Tov Kuntres 515 tefillos, and the answer was still no. And yet, for some odd reason, this is the one thing that's they already conquered Sichon and Oig. They already were by the Eved HaYarden. They were ready to go in. Why would this be the one thing that has to hold Moshe Rabbeinu back from going up to Shemayim and passing away? And he can't pass away before this. So we see that it's a spiritual Inyan. This whole Inyan is a spiritual Inyan. Now we're going to make a statement. That's why it's blue. Says the Rebbe. Let's talk about Midian, however means that, like we just finished saying, there's a lot beneath the surface. You're not talking about a regular enemy. First, let's examine Midian. Midian, in its words, in its spelling, in its letters, it denotes Modoin Umeriva. Modoin means descent. Modoin means divisiveness. Meriva means opposition, fighting, not getting along, machlekes. So the Zeh who called Inyan Klipas Midian, Shua Pirud Vaischalkus, who Sinas Chinam Upirud Lavavis, Shua Heipich Legamri Misiti Legdusha, Shua Bechinas Achtas Dafka. Okay, here we are going to talk a little bit about the idea of hatred. Sometimes somebody is hated by someone else because you're getting in my way. I have a goal. I have a life. I have my own objectives. And if you're going to disturb me for achieving my goals, for achieving my success, you're going to bring out a hatred from me towards you. So, which means is that there's a basis for this hatred. Then you have something else completely. Its entire existence is hatefulness. Anything else, any other reasoning or any other basis is only to support this essential trait, which is hatefulness, divisiveness. That is the obsession. The obsession is the machlekes. And whatever is that is fueling the machlekes is just helping to achieve machlekes, not the other way around. That's why Midyan is completely and entirely, as the name itself says, Modainu Meriva, and just totally confrontational, constantly saying the opposite, constantly negating somebody else. That's what it's about. That's its entire mission, its entire being. And what does he say that it's the difference between Kedusha, the opposite of Kedusha? Because we know that Kedusha is likened to light. The idea of light is that it shares. The idea of light is that it spreads. Light is the opposite of selfishness and selflessness. And selfishness and self-centeredness, self-absorption. Light, by intrinsically, it spreads, it shares, it goes as far as it can go. And if there's nothing in the way, it will go for miles and miles, albeit that it'll be weaker because there's such a big distance. But it doesn't want to stop for anything. It doesn't say, I gave you and now I'm keeping. No, light is something that shares. Why? What's the component in Kedusha? Kedusha is bittul. Bittul is the opposite of selfishness. It's total selflessness. So here you have something that the core, the extreme, the enemy of Kedusha to the furthest extreme. Whatever is more Kedusha is more sharing, is more united, is more inclusive. Whatever is, automatically, whatever is going to be less inclusive, more divided, is going to be that much stronger. The more it is, it'll be that much more the epitome of the polar opposite of Kedusha. Okay, so Kedusha is Achtus, Klipa is Pirud, Midyan is Madana Meriva, which is Pirud. And now you see the lines. So we're going to talk now about Toyin and Tikkun. I'm going to give you some explanation by heart. And as pointed out over here, I neglected to state that the whole inyan of Midyan is baseless hatred, which means, in other words, that there is no basis, there is no reason, there is no cause. So when you remove the cause, then the effect will be, the result wouldn't be there, because it's only because of the cause that it's there. When it comes to Midyan, it's baseless. It's got a mind of its own. It's just propelled by a need for hatred. Well, let's get into a little bit about Kedusha now. What do we find by Kedusha? We find by Kedusha is kalalos. What does this kalalos mean? We all know this, the Sfiros, the Midas, the 7 Midas, and the 3 Meichin. And we all know from Sfiros HaOmer and from any mimer or anything that we learned, we all know that the spheres of Kedusha are comprised and they're inclusive with all the rest of the spheres. That means every sphere is made up of all the rest of the spheres. That's why you have Gvura within Chesed, the Tiferes within Chesed, That means in chesed itself, what makes up chesed are the other midas. And that's complete achdus. That's complete hiskalalos, which means comprised of and combined with the other midas. That's the ultimate achdus. The ultimate achdus that my very me is all, the structure, Klal Yisrael, is all sharing and all blended together in such a way that this is what makes up a yid, is made up of other yid, of other neshamas. And spheres are made up of other spheres because it's all about how we are one and how we are together and we are here for the same purpose. And we are made up of each other. The only reason why it's called chesed in this case is because chesed is the dominant ingredient, the dominant factor, and the rest are less. But there's always all the rest in the spheres, because it's spheres to Kedusha. However, when it comes to spheres of Klipa, it's a different story completely. There's no iskalos. This is this and nothing else. There's no sharing. There's no unity. And so anything that's going to be less and less and more a symbol of selfishness is going to be automatically a greater klipa. So here we have something that's for the sake of selfishness. Sometimes somebody has something, and if you take my Danish, I won't have it. So I don't want you to have it because I want it. But then there's sometimes that someone just doesn't want you to have it. It has nothing to do with him having or not having it. He doesn't want you to have it. That's for the sake of not forgetting. Like Midas Dain, basically. Midas Dain for the sake of evil, for the sake of making other people's lives miserable. Nothing to do with what I gain as a result of that. Okay. So we know, and we're just going to conclude with this, and that will be the conclusion of Beis Gimel. I'll go to the end of Beis Gimel by discussing it outside the Sefer and just looking in a little bit where we have the highlighted part. Where do we see this? Everything that we say, everything that we talk about has to have its basis in Torah, because this is Torah. This is Chassidus. So it's not just ideas, it's not Chakira, which if it's done by holy people, it also has its basis in holiness, but it can't be considered Torah. It's just reasoning that leads you to conclude, that's not Chakira, this is Torah. So whenever you're going to see an idea expressed in a Maimer Chassidus, it's going to give you the basis for it. It's going to give you its origin. So it's interesting how we see by Yaakov represents Kedusha. Yaakov Avinu. He wanted the Ahavas, the third of the Ahavas, the Chirshir Ahavas, the chosen one was Mitosai Shlem, etc. So Yaakov says to Esav, Ochi Yeshli Koil. What does Koil mean? Koil could mean I have everything. But here, Sidus explains it, Koil means iskalos. I have unity. Koil means how one thing is comprised and mixed and blended together with something else. So, Ochi Yeshli Koil, that's Yaakov's position. That's Kedusha's position. What does Esav say? Ochi Yeshli Rav. I have, Rav again could mean a lot. So in this sense, Yaakov is saying he has more than Esav. No, because Yaakov is saying Kol and Esav is saying Rav. No. In this case, the word Rav means riboy, multitude. What is multitude? Multitude is when you have a lot of separate things, then there's the multiplicity that comes in to the picture. But when you have a lot of things bound and joined together and mixed together, blended together, and make up one thing, then it's not a multitude. So what Yaakov is saying, I have a scholarless. What Esav is saying is, I have pirut. So for instance, if you have parts, a cake, right? You have a lot of ingredients in the cake. But what do you have? You have a cake. If each ingredient refuses to mix together and to make up one dish or one baked dish, then what you have is a lot of ingredients. You don't have a cake. So Yaakov is basically saying, I have unity. And you, Esav, you have pirut. This is just to explain how the inyan of Klippa is all about Pirud, and Midyan is the quintessential selfish, yeshus, hatred, which is all the same idea, which comes from Gaida. So let's just finish over here with the line that I'm going to go all the way to the highlighted line. No, however, Klippas Midyan ain't the practice can Miklal the singing up to you, Pirud. Now, we said before that the Zion Midas, they are against Kedusha because the Zion Midas are nice. And however, the Zion Midas are still a Midah to some degree that they are representing something with an expression. It's a Midah. The Midyan is not even a Midah, as we said before, that Midyan is not part of the Zion Midas, it's not part of the Zion Umas. So it's not one of the, it's not one. It's the whole thing. It's the whole Klippa. It's something that is representing Tohu, which is the inyan of Pirud. Talk about Tikkun and Tohu, I can't get it in now. But the idea of Tohu is that it didn't have a way of combining with the other spheres, and that's why it wasn't able to last, and it basically exploded. So you have something that's a part of something, and then you have that thing itself. Midyan is the simple, is the central, basic, general form of evil, beyond expressing itself in one detail or another detail. Because if it's expressed in a detail, it's already subjected to some kind of a cause, and then there's something that could be changed in it. When something is just that way in its essence, which is what Midyan is, as we'll talk about in the next year, then you have a whole different story. Then you have sinas chinam, baseless hatred. And of course, we're going to connect it to how that could be in every Yid's Avodah and how we have to work on ourselves very hard because it's a tendency, but it's in a very finer, it's in a more edler way how it expresses itself within our lives, because it's a natural tendency that comes together with a guf and a nefesh ba'amis, and how we have to be able to identify it and how we have to be able to eradicate it. Okay, have a good day, a good night. Mashiach now. The it is we should have only good news. Now.